Imagine being so feared by your enemies that they believe you're a ghost who cannot be killed. Imagine flying through a storm of bullets, your plane riddled with holes, and still coming back for more. Now imagine doing this not once, not twice, but 28 times in aerial combat. This is the story of a man who the Japanese called the Ghost, a rebellious pilot who broke every rule, drank too much, fought with his superiors, and somehow became one of America's greatest war heroes. This is the legend of Pappy Boyington, the most unconventional ace to ever take to the skies over Guadalcanal. Gregory Boyington wasn't born a hero, he was born a problem, growing up in the rough logging towns of Washington State in the 1910s. Young Greg learned to fight with his fists before he learned to fight in the air. His childhood was turbulent, marked by his parents' difficult marriage and eventual divorce. He found escape in wrestling and football, channeling his aggression into sports, where his competitive fire could burn without consequence. At the University of Washington, Boyington was a star wrestler, but even then, the pattern emerged. He was talented, fearless, and completely undisciplined. He drank heavily, got into fights, and seemed determined to prove that rules were made for other people. Yet somehow, he earned a degree in aeronautical engineering and caught the flying bug that would define his life. In 1935, Boyington joined the Marine Corps Reserve and earned his wings. But military life and Boyington mixed like oil and water. He was a natural pilot, with reflexes that seemed almost supernatural and an aggressive flying style that instructors both admired and feared. But he couldn't follow orders, couldn't keep his mouth shut when dealing with superior officers, and couldn't stay away from the bottle. By 1941, with a wife, 3 children, and debts piling up faster than he could count, Boyington was a captain going nowhere fast in the Marine Corps. Then came an opportunity that seemed tailor-made for a man like him. The American Volunteer Group, better known as the Flying Tigers, was recruiting pilots to fight for China against the Japanese invasion. The pay was incredible, $600 a month plus $500 for every Japanese plane shot down. For a man drowning in debt and desperate for action, it was irresistible. Boyington resigned his Marine Corps commission and shipped out to Burma. In the skies over Burma and China, Boyington finally found a place where his aggressive instincts were an asset rather than a liability. Flying the iconic P-4O Warhawk with its shark teeth nose, he threw himself into combat with a ferocity that impressed even the other Flying Tigers, a group not known for timid flying. But even in this band of mercenaries and misfits, Boyington stood out for all the wrong reasons. He drank excessively, gambled away his pay, and got into legendary arguments with the group's commander, Claire Chennault. While other pilots saw Boyington's skill in the air, Chennault saw only a drunk who couldn't follow orders. The tension reached a breaking point, and after shooting down 6 Japanese planes, Boyington was essentially forced out of the Flying Tigers. He returned to the United States in 1942, broke, divorced, and seemingly washed up at 30 years old. Most men would have been finished, but World War II was raging, and America needed pilots desperately. The Marine Corps, despite everything, took him back. They sent him to the South Pacific, to a place that would soon become legendary in the annals of military history, Guadalcanal. Guadalcanal in 1943 was hell on earth. The island, a strategic stronghold in the Solomon Islands, had been the site of brutal fighting between American and Japanese forces. The air war above the island was equally vicious, with daily raids by Japanese bombers from their base at Rabaul, escorted by the feared Zero fighters. American pilots were exhausted, undermanned, and losing aircraft at an alarming rate. Major Boyington arrived at Marine Corps Air Station Mundo with a chip on his shoulder and a radical idea. There were pilots scattered throughout the South Pacific who, like him, were replacement pilots waiting for squadron assignments, misfits who'd been bounced from other units, or guys with disciplinary problems. Boyington proposed forming a new squadron from these leftovers, these forgotten men. The brass, desperate for any solution, gave him the green light. Marine Fighter Squadron 214 was officially reformed under Boyington's command in September 1943. The pilots called themselves Boyingtons. Bastards, but a war correspondent convinced them to change it to something more printable. The Black Sheep Squadron. They adopted a logo featuring a black sheep standing defiant, which perfectly captured their attitude. This wasn't your typical military unit. These men were brawlers, drinkers, and troublemakers. They broke regulations, showed up late, and drove the base commanders crazy. But when Boyington led them into the air, they transformed into something magnificent. He taught them to fly the way he did, aggressively, creatively, and with utter fearlessness. Boyington's flying style was unlike anything the Japanese had encountered. Most American pilots followed their training, maintaining formations and fighting by the book. Boyington threw the book away. He taught his black sheep to break formation when necessary, to trust their instincts, and to attack with overwhelming aggression. His favorite tactic became legendary. He would take for F4U Corsairs, the powerful new fighter that had just arrived in the Pacific, and fly ahead of American bomber formations as bait. When Japanese Zeros dove down to attack what appeared to be a small, vulnerable group, Boyington would lead them into a trap. The other Corsairs would pounce from above, turning the hunters into the hunted. It was dangerous, audacious, and it worked brilliantly. The Japanese began to notice that whenever this particular pilot was in the air, their losses mounted. Boyington's Corsair, marked with the number 86, became a sight that struck fear into enemy pilots. They started calling him the Ghost because he seemed impossible to kill. Bullets would tear through his plane, but he'd keep flying. They'd think they had him cornered, but he'd somehow escape. Pilots who engaged him rarely returned to tell the tale. On October 27, 1943, Boyington shot down his 14th plane, tying him with Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record for Marine Corps aces. The press back home began paying attention to this hard-drinking, rule-breaking pilot who was becoming a legend in the South Pacific. But Boyington wasn't interested in records or publicity. He was interested in two things: drinking and killing Japanese planes, and not necessarily in that order. As 1943 turned to 1944, Boyington became obsessed with breaking the American fighter ace record of 26 victories, held by his old Flying Tigers commander, Eddie Rickenbacker. It wasn't just about the record, it was about proving something to everyone who'd ever doubted him, everyone who'd called him a drunk and a failure. The Black Sheep flew mission after mission, and Boyington's kill count climbed steadily. 20 victories, 22, 24. The Japanese knew he was coming and began sending their best pilots specifically to hunt the Ghost. Every mission became more dangerous than the last. On January 3, 1944, Boyington led a fighter sweep near Rabaul, the massive Japanese naval and air base. It was one of the most heavily defended positions in the Pacific, surrounded by anti-aircraft guns and swarms of Zero fighters. As the Black Sheep engaged the enemy, Boyington spotted a Zero and dove after it. His guns blazed, and the Zero went down in flames. His 26th victory, tying the record. Minutes later, he spotted another Zero. He pursued it aggressively, perhaps too aggressively, his focus narrowing to just this one target. His guns chattered again, and the Zero tumbled toward the ocean. Number 27, breaking the record. But in his pursuit, Boyington had made a fatal mistake. He'd separated from his wingman and found himself alone over enemy territory. What happened next has been debated for decades. Multiple Japanese fighters swarmed Boyington's Corsair. His plane shuddered as cannon shells tore through the wings and fuselage. Smoke poured from the engine. He tried to climb, to fight, to do anything, but his controls were shot to pieces. The Corsair was dying. At 3,000 feet, Boyington made the decision to bail out. He jettisoned the canopy and threw himself into the air, pulling his ripcord as Japanese fighters screamed past. their pilots firing at him even as he descended helplessly beneath his parachute. It was a violation of the rules of war, but this was the Pacific, where such rules were often ignored. Boyington hit the water hard. His injuries were severe: wounds from the attack, broken ribs, damaged legs. He inflated his life raft and floated in the Solomon Sea, watching his squadron search frantically for him before fuel forced them to return to base. As the sun set, Boyington was alone in enemy waters, wounded and exhausted. Back at base, the Black Sheep were devastated. They flew search patterns for days, hoping to spot their leader, but found nothing. After 2 weeks, the Marine Corps declared Major Gregory Boyington missing in action, presumed dead. The ghost of Guadalcanal had apparently made his final flight, but Pappy Boyington wasn't dead. A Japanese submarine had surfaced near his life raft and taken him prisoner. For the next 20 months, Boyington would endure a different kind of hell. He was moved between several prisoner of war camps, including the notorious Ofuna Interrogation Center, where prisoners existed in legal limbo, unregistered with the Red Cross and subject to brutal treatment. The Japanese knew exactly who they had captured. They interrogated him repeatedly, trying to extract information about American tactics and aircraft. True to form, Boyington gave them nothing but sarcasm and defiance. The beatings he endured were severe, but he refused to break. The same stubborn rebelliousness that had caused him so much trouble in his career now kept him alive. He was eventually transferred to Omori prison camp near Tokyo, where he spent the remainder of the war. The conditions were brutal: starvation rations, disease, forced labor, and regular beatings. Boyington watched fellow prisoners die from malnutrition and disease. At his lowest point, weighing barely 120 pounds, he wondered if he would ever see home again. On August 29, 1945, 2 weeks after Japan's surrender, American forces liberated Omori prison camp. Among the skeletal, barely alive prisoners they found was Gregory Boyington, alive but barely recognizable. When news reached the United States that the famous ace was alive, the country celebrated. The man they'd mourned as dead had survived the unsurvivable. On October 5, 1945, President Harry Truman personally awarded Boyington the Medal of Honor at the White House. The citation mentioned his 28 confirmed victories. The final victory counted was one claimed by another pilot who had seen a zero go down during that final mission. Standing before the president in his dress uniform, Boyington looked every inch the war hero. Inside, he was still the same troubled man he'd always been. The Marine Corps promoted him to lieutenant colonel and sent him on a war bond tour. Americans couldn't get enough of Pappy Boyington. He was on magazine covers, radio shows, and newsreels. Publishers offered him book deals. Hollywood wanted to make a movie about his life. For a brief moment, everything Boyington had ever wanted seemed within reach. But Pappy Boyington discovered what many warriors have learned throughout history: peace is often harder than war. Without the structure of combat, without an enemy to fight and a mission to complete, Boyington's demons came roaring back with a vengeance. He drank heavily, trying to drown the memories of war and imprisonment. His marriages failed, one after another. He struggled to hold jobs, burning through opportunities that other men would have treasured. The hero worship that had initially thrilled him began to feel suffocating. People wanted Pappy Boyington the legend, not Greg Boyington the flawed, damaged man. He wrote an autobiography, Black Sheep, published in 1958, that became a bestseller. In it, he was brutally honest about his failures, his drinking, and his troubled relationships. It was a raw, unvarnished look at a war hero's life, and it resonated with readers who were tired of sanitized military memoirs. The 1970s brought an unexpected revival of interest in Boyington's story when the television series Black Sheep, later renamed Black Sheep Squadron, aired on NBC, though heavily fictionalized and taking considerable liberties with the facts. The show introduced a new generation to Boyington's legend. By then an older man, Boyington appeared occasionally on the show and at promotional events, bemused by his transformation into a television character. In his later years, Boyington found a measure of peace he'd never known as a young man. He spoke at schools and military events, honest about his struggles with alcohol and the cost of war. He became, ironically, a voice of wisdom about the very discipline and responsibility he'd spent his youth rejecting. Gregory Pappy Boyington died on January 11th, 1988, at the age of 75. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. Fighter jets flew overhead in the missing man formation, and Marines stood at attention as a flawed, complicated, magnificent warrior was laid to rest. The ghost of Guadalcanal wasn't a perfect hero. He was a drunk, a brawler, and a man who broke nearly every rule in the book. But when his country needed him, when the bullets were flying and the odds were impossible, Gregory Boyington was exactly the kind of warrior America needed. He led by example, never asking his men to take risks he wouldn't take himself. He shot down 28 enemy aircraft in aerial combat, spent 20 months as a prisoner of war, and earned the Medal of Honor. But perhaps his greatest legacy isn't the planes he shot down or the medals he earned. It's the reminder that heroes aren't perfect. They're flawed human beings who, when the moment demands it, find the courage to be extraordinary. Pappy Boyington proved that you don't have to be a model soldier to be a great warrior, and you don't have to follow every rule to serve with honor. The Black Sheep Squadron he created flew together for just 84 days, but in that short time, they shot down 94 enemy aircraft and became one of the most legendary fighting units in Marine Corps' history. They were misfits, rebels, and troublemakers who, under the leadership of the biggest misfit of them all, became something more than the sum of their parts. So the next time someone tells you that you have to be perfect to be great, remember Pappy Boyington. Remember the ghost of Guadalcanal. Remember that sometimes the most unlikely people become the most unforgettable heroes. If this story of rebellion, courage, and redemption moved you, hit that like button and drop a comment below. What do you think made Pappy Boyington so effective as a leader despite his flaws? Was he a hero, or was he just a troubled man who got lucky? Share your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe to Silent Warriors for more incredible stories of America's forgotten heroes. These warriors deserve to be remembered, and your support helps keep their legends alive. Until next time, stay strong, stay curious, and never forget the warriors who fought for our freedom.